My name is Vivian, 34 years old, and a forensic accountant who thought I had seen every type of fraud and deception imaginable. But nothing prepared me for the phone call I received at 11 on a freezing Tuesday night in the middle of a brutal winter storm. It was my 9-year-old niece Maya whispering in absolute terror from the pitch-black attic of my parents' multi-million-dollar estate. She was freezing, locked in from the outside, and had not eaten in 2 days. When I finally smashed through my parents' pristine glass door to save her, I uncovered a web of cruelty and financial deceit that would ultimately land my own family in federal court. Before I continue this story, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit the like button and subscribe right now if you have ever had to step up and protect an innocent child from the toxic people who were supposed to love and cherish them the most. The blizzard had been raging across the Chicago suburbs for 3 hours, burying the streets under a thick layer of ice and snow. I was sitting at my dining table surrounded by stacks of encrypted bank statements and tax files for an embezzlement case I was auditing. As a forensic accountant, I spent my life looking for hidden truths in numbers. But the truth that was about to shatter my family did not come from a spreadsheet. It came from my ringing cell phone. The caller ID flashing on the screen showed my parents' landline. I almost did not answer. My parents, Richard and Victoria, never called me unless they needed a scapegoat or a free financial consultation for their shady real estate deals. But something told me to pick up. I pressed the phone to my ear and heard ragged, shivering breaths. "Mom is not here," I said tiredly, assuming it was my golden child brother Julian trying to track down our parents. "It is Maya." The tiny voice was so faint, I had to press the phone hard against my ear. "Aunt Vivian, please help me. I am so cold." I shot up from my chair, my tax files scattering across the floor. "Maya, sweetie, where are you? Why are you calling from the house landline? I am in the attic." Her teeth were chattering so violently I could barely make out the words. "The power went out a long time ago. It is pitch black. I tried to go downstairs, but the door is locked from the outside. I am so hungry, Aunt Vivian. I have not had anything to eat since yesterday morning." My blood turned to ice colder than the storm raging outside my window. Locked in the attic. No power. No food. "Where are your grandparents?" I demanded, grabbing my heavy winter coat and my car keys. "They left," Maya sobbed. "They put their big suitcases in a black car yesterday morning. Grandma told me to stay in the attic so I would not mess up the living room while she was gone. She locked the door. She said she would be back, but I am so scared. Stay exactly where you are," I ordered, shoving my feet into my snow boots. "Wrap yourself in whatever blankets you can find. I am coming right now. Do not hang up the phone. Keep talking to me." I sprinted out of my apartment and threw myself into my SUV. The roads were a treacherous nightmare of unplowed snow and black ice, but I slammed my foot on the gas anyway. My heart hammered against my ribs as I navigated the dangerous streets toward the exclusive gated community where my parents lived. Through the phone speaker on my dashboard, I could hear Maya crying softly. I kept my voice steady, promising her over and over that I was almost there, while inside a volcanic rage was building. My parents, Richard and Victoria, were obsessed with control. They micromanaged every aspect of our family image, from the exact shade of white on their mansion walls to the prestigious country club memberships they flaunted. Yet here they were, leaving a 9-year-old child locked in an unheated attic during a deadly blizzard. But then again, Maya was never part of their perfect image. She was the mixed-race daughter of my brother Julian and his first wife, Kendra. When Julian left Kendra for a wealthy white heiress, my parents used their expensive lawyers to rip custody away from Kendra, claiming her grueling hours as an emergency room nurse made her an unfit mother. They bragged to their country club friends about rescuing their granddaughter, but the reality was a sickening display of racism and cruelty. They hid Maya away like a dirty secret, treating her like an inconvenience rather than a child. I gripped the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. My tires spun on a patch of ice, sending my car sliding toward a snowbank, but I wrenched the wheel hard and regained control. I was definitely not going to let the storm stop me today. I muttered curses under my breath, thinking about Julian, the golden boy who could do no wrong. He lived just 20 minutes away in a luxury condo with his new perfect family, completely ignoring the daughter he had fought so ruthlessly to take from her mother. My parents demanded absolute perfection from me, criticizing my single status and my demanding career at every holiday dinner. Yet they enabled my brother's deadbeat behavior with open checkbooks and endless excuses. I pressed harder on the accelerator, my headlights cutting through the blinding snow. I did not care about their rules or their perfect image anymore. I was going to get my niece out of that freezing house tonight. Once she was safe and warm, I was going to systematically dismantle their entire flawless world and expose the monsters they truly were. My name is Vivian, and I am 34 years old. I work as a forensic accountant uncovering financial crimes and exposing corporate liars for a living. I thought I had seen the absolute worst of human greed, but nothing prepared me for the phone call I received on a freezing winter night. My 9-year-old niece Maya was whispering in sheer terror from the pitch-black attic of my parents' multi-million-dollar mansion. She was locked in from the outside, completely alone in the freezing dark, and had not eaten since yesterday morning. When I finally reached her, I uncovered a sickening web of abuse and financial deceit that forced me to drag my own family into federal court. Before I continue this story, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit the like button and subscribe right now if you have ever had to step up and protect an innocent child from the toxic people who were supposed to love them the most. It was 11 at night, and a brutal winter storm was burying Chicago under a suffocating layer of ice and snow. I was sitting at my dining table, buried in encrypted tax files for a massive embezzlement case. As an auditor, I spent my life looking for hidden truths buried deep in numbers. But the truth that was about to shatter my entire family did not come from a complicated spreadsheet. It came from my ringing cell phone. The caller identification flashing on the bright screen showed my parents' landline. I almost did not answer it. My parents, Richard and Victoria, never bothered to call me unless they needed a convenient scapegoat or a free financial consultation for their shady real estate investments. But something instinctive told me to pick up the call immediately. I pressed the cold phone against my ear and heard ragged, shivering breaths. "Mom is not here," I said tiredly, assuming it was my golden child brother Julian trying to track down our parents during the blizzard. "It is Maya." The tiny voice was so fragile I had to press the phone hard against my ear to hear her. "Aunt Vivian, please help me. I am so scared." She was sobbing quietly. I shot up from my chair, sending my tax files scattering across the floor. "Maya, sweetie, where exactly are you right now, please? Why are you calling me from the house landline? I am in the dark attic." Her teeth were chattering so violently I could barely make out her words. "The power went out a long time ago. It is pitch black. I tried to go downstairs, but the door is locked from the outside. I am so hungry, Aunt Vivian. I have not had anything to eat since yesterday morning." My blood turned to solid ice, feeling much colder than the storm raging outside my window. Locked in the freezing attic. No power, no food. "Where are your grandparents right now?" I demanded, grabbing my winter coat and my car keys from the counter. "They left." Maya sobbed helplessly into the receiver. "They put their suitcases in a black car yesterday morning. Grandma told me to stay up in the attic so I would not mess up her living room while she was gone. She locked the door. She said she would be back, but I am so incredibly scared." "Stay exactly where you are," I ordered, shoving my feet into my snow boots. "Wrap your body in whatever warm blankets you can find. I am coming to get you right now. Do not hang up the phone. Keep talking to me, Maya." I sprinted out of my apartment building and threw myself into my SUV. The suburban roads were a treacherous nightmare of unplowed snow and black ice, but I slammed my boot on the gas anyway. My heart hammered against my ribs as I navigated the slippery streets toward the exclusive gated community where my parents lived. Through the phone speaker on my dashboard, I could hear Maya crying softly in the dark. I kept my voice steady, promising her over and over that I was almost there while inside a volcanic rage was building rapidly. My parents, Richard and Victoria, were entirely obsessed with maintaining absolute control over everyone. They micromanaged every single aspect of our polished family image, from the exact shade of white on their mansion walls to the prestigious country club memberships they shamelessly flaunted everywhere. Yet here they were, casually leaving a 9-year-old child locked away in an unheated attic during a deadly blizzard. But Maya was never truly considered part of their perfect image. She was the mixed-race daughter of my older brother Julian and his first wife Kendra. When Julian left Kendra for a wealthy heiress, my parents used their expensive lawyers to rip custody away from Kendra, claiming her grueling hours as an emergency room nurse made her an unfit mother. They bragged to their country club friends about rescuing their granddaughter, but the reality was a sickening display of racism and cruelty. They purposely hid Maya away like a dirty secret, treating her like a massive inconvenience rather than a living child who desperately needed unconditional love. I gripped the steering wheel so hard, my knuckles turned completely white. My tires spun recklessly on a patch of black ice, sending my vehicle sliding toward a massive snowbank, but I wrenched the wheel hard and quickly regained full physical control. I muttered harsh curses under my breath, thinking about Julian. The beloved golden boy, who could do absolutely no wrong in their eyes, lived just 20 short minutes away, in a luxurious high-rise condo, with his brand-new perfect family, completely ignoring the innocent daughter he had forcefully taken from her loving mother. I hit the gas, speeding toward the dark, silent estate. I would certainly save her tonight and destroy them all tomorrow morning without fail. I fishtailed my vehicle into the massive circular driveway of my parents' estate. The wrought iron gates had been left open wide, likely by the private car service that whisked them away to the airport. The sprawling brick mansion stood completely dark against the raging blizzard, like a lifeless fortress of arrogance. I slammed the car into park, leaving the engine running and the headlights cutting through the heavy snowfall. I sprinted up the icy front steps and pounded my fists against the heavy oak double doors. I screamed for the live-in housekeeper and the private chef, but the house remained entirely silent. It hit me then that my parents must have given the entire domestic staff paid time off for the duration of their European vacation, deliberately ensuring no one would be around to check on the child locked upstairs. Panic surged through my veins. I ran back down the slippery steps and opened the trunk of my SUV, pulling out a heavy metal tire iron. I trudged through the knee-deep snow around the side of the house toward the expansive back patio. The custom Italian glass doors cost $10,000 to import and install. My mother had bragged about them endlessly at her last dinner party. I did not hesitate for a single second. I swung the heavy iron bar with every ounce of strength in my body, shattering the pristine glass into a million glittering pieces across the expensive hardwood floor. The freezing wind howled as it rushed into the immaculate living room, but I ignored the biting cold and climbed straight through the jagged opening. I turned on my phone flashlight, cutting a narrow beam through the oppressive darkness of the empty mansion. I took the grand sweeping staircase 2 steps at a time, my snow boots leaving wet tracks across the priceless Persian rugs. I sprinted down the second-floor hallway and found the narrow hidden staircase leading up to the third-floor attic space. When I reached the top, my breath hitched in my throat. The heavy wooden door was secured shut with a thick metal deadbolt locked firmly from the outside. The sheer calculated cruelty of that lock made my stomach heave. They did not just leave her upstairs, they imprisoned her. I raised my heavy snow boot and kicked the door right beside the lock. It took 3 agonizingly loud kicks before the wooden frame splintered and the door flew open. "Maya," I shouted, scanning the freezing dark space with my flashlight beam. The attic was completely uninsulated, feeling more like a meat freezer than a room. In the far corner, huddled beneath a single thin decorative throw blanket, was a tiny trembling shape. I dropped to my knees beside her. Maya was curled into a tight ball, shivering so violently, her teeth rattled together. When I touched her forehead, the contrast was terrifying. Her small body was freezing, but her skin was burning with a raging fever. She opened her eyes, squinting against the harsh flashlight beam, and let out a weak sob. "You came, Aunt Vivian. I promised I would," I whispered, fighting back a wave of furious tears. I stripped off my heavy winter coat and wrapped it tightly around her small shoulders, cocooning her against the biting cold. I scooped her up into my arms. She felt impossibly light, practically skin and bones. I held her against my chest and carefully navigated my way back down the treacherous staircases. I carried her straight into the massive gourmet kitchen, gently setting her down on one of the plush velvet bar stools. I needed to find her some water and whatever quick sugar I could locate before rushing her to the emergency room. I kept one arm securely around her while searching the marble countertops with my flashlight. That was when the beam of light caught a small square of neon yellow paper stuck directly to the center of the pristine marble island. It was a casually written sticky note left behind by my mother. I leaned closer to read her elegant cursive handwriting and felt my blood boil in my veins. The note read exactly like this: "Off to Paris for the wine-tasting fortnight. Left a loaf of bread for Maya. Tell Julian to wire another $5,000 to the care fund this week." I stared at the neon yellow paper, my mind struggling to process the sheer magnitude of their casual evil. They had literally packed their luggage and boarded a luxury first-class flight across the Atlantic Ocean to sip expensive wine while deliberately locking a 9-year-old child in a freezing attic. A single loaf of bread. That was their idea of providing for their own granddaughter. They treated her like an unwanted stray animal left behind during a vacation. But what truly caught the attention of my forensic accountant brain was the final sentence. Tell Julian to wire another $5,000 to the care fund. My parents were extorting my brother for a massive amount of money under the guise of specialized childcare. Julian was blindly wiring them $5,000 a week, believing they were providing Maya with premium tutors and luxury living conditions. Meanwhile, they were starving her in the dark. But it went even deeper than that. As an auditor, I knew exactly what a recurring $5,000 wire transfer meant. That was $20,000 a month, $240,000 a year. That kind of untaxed, undocumented cash flow was not just a family arrangement. It was a highly illegal money laundering scheme masquerading as family support. They were using this innocent sick child as a lucrative financial asset to fund their lavish lifestyle and tax evasion. A sudden wave of intense heat radiated from Maya, reminding me of the immediate crisis at hand. She slumped heavily against my side, her breathing shallow and raspy. The financial crimes could wait until tomorrow. Right now, my only priority was keeping this little girl alive. I gathered her back into my arms, holding her tightly against my chest. "Do not worry, sweetie," I murmured, pressing a kiss to her burning forehead. "We are leaving this terrible place right now, and you are never coming back here again." I grabbed the yellow sticky note, shoving it deep into my pocket as the first piece of hard physical evidence. I carried her back through the shattered glass door and out into the howling blizzard. They had chosen to leave her here to freeze while they drank champagne in Paris, but they had completely forgotten one crucial detail. I was the one person in this family who knew exactly how to follow the money, and I was going to use every single cent of their stolen wealth to utterly destroy their perfect lives. I slammed the SUV into gear and tore out of the estate, leaving the shattered glass and the heavy iron gates behind me. The heater was blasted on maximum, but Maya was still shivering uncontrollably in the passenger seat, completely swallowed by my oversized winter coat. Her breathing was dangerously shallow. I pushed the accelerator down, forcing the heavy vehicle to plow through the accumulating snow. The blizzard was blinding, turning the suburban streets into a solid white blur, but I did not care. Adrenaline fueled every single movement I made. "Hang on, Maya." I kept saying, my voice tight with panic. "We are almost there, sweetie, just stay awake for me." She did not answer. Her eyes were rolled back slightly and her small chest barely moved. The silence in the car was deafening, broken only by the aggressive slapping of the windshield wipers. Every second felt like an eternity. I ran 3 red lights, blaring my horn as I skidded around icy corners, desperate to reach the hospital before her fragile body completely gave out. My mind raced with the terrifying reality of her condition. This was not just a case of bad parenting. This was deliberate, systematic abuse. They had starved a child and locked her in a freezing attic while they flew across the ocean. The glowing red emergency room sign finally pierced through the heavy snowfall like a beacon. I swerved into the ambulance bay, threw the car in park, and unbuckled my seatbelt in one fluid motion. I scooped Maya into my arms, kicking the car door shut behind me, and sprinted toward the sliding glass doors. "Help me!" I screamed, bursting into the sterile, brightly lit waiting room. "I need a doctor right now." The triage nurses took one look at the limp, freezing child in my arms and sprang into immediate action. A gurney was rolled out instantly. I placed her onto the crisp, white sheets, watching helplessly as the medical team swarmed around her. They moved with terrifying speed, shouting out medical terms and vital signs that made my stomach churn. "Her core temperature is dangerously low," a doctor yelled, shining a penlight into Maya's unresponsive eyes. "We have severe hypothermia here. Get the heated blankets and start a warmed saline intravenous drip immediately." Another nurse was rapidly cutting away the thin, damp clothes Maya had been wearing. "Oh my God," the nurse gasped, stepping back for a fraction of a second. "Doctor, look at her ribs." I pushed my way forward and felt the breath get knocked completely out of my lungs. Maya was severely emaciated. Her collarbones protruded sharply against her pale skin, and her stomach was deeply sunken. The physical evidence of prolonged starvation was undeniable. This was not the result of missing a few meals during a weekend trip. This was chronic severe malnutrition. "How long has she been without food?" the doctor demanded, turning to me with a sharp, intense gaze. I swallowed hard, the neon yellow sticky note burning a hole in my coat pocket. "Days," I choked out. "Maybe longer." They took her away, rushing the gurney down the long white corridor through a set of heavy double doors that I was not allowed to pass. I collapsed into a hard plastic chair in the waiting room, my hands shaking violently. The adrenaline was slowly leaving my system, replaced by a deep, sickening horror. I stared at my hands still cold from the freezing attic and realized I was entirely alone. My parents were thousands of miles away, sipping expensive champagne in a first-class cabin. The harsh fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, amplifying the agonizing silence of the waiting area. Every time the double doors swung open, I jumped, hoping for an update from the medical team, but it was always just staff rushing past. Then the sharp ringing of my cell phone shattered the quiet. I yanked it out of my pocket, desperately hoping it was the doctor calling the front desk. But the name flashing across the cracked screen made my jaw clench. It was Julian, the golden child. The biological father who had fought so viciously in court to rip Maya away from her loving mother, only to dump her at our parents' mansion like unwanted baggage. He lived a mere 20 minutes away, in a luxury penthouse with his new wealthy wife and their two perfectly pampered children. I stared at his name, feeling a sudden surge of hope. Maybe the hospital had called him. Maybe he had finally realized his daughter was missing. Maybe somewhere deep down beneath all the arrogance and entitlement, he actually cared that his firstborn child was fighting for her life in an emergency room. I swiped the screen and brought the phone to my ear. "Julian," I said, my voice trembling slightly. "Thank God you are awake. Listen, you need to get to Memorial Hospital right now. Maya is in critical condition." "Are you out of your mind?" he roared, cutting me off before I could even finish my sentence. His voice was so loud and full of venom, I had to pull the phone away from my ear. The absolute sheer rage vibrating through the speaker had nothing to do with concern or fear for his child. "What is wrong with you, Vivian?" I just got a frantic alert from the smart home security application on my phone. The motion sensors tripped and the cameras caught your SUV speeding out of the driveway. I checked the live feed and the entire back patio door is shattered into a million pieces. "Do you have any idea how much that custom Italian glass costs? You are paying for that, you hysterical spinster." I sat frozen in the hard plastic hospital chair, unable to process the words coming out of his mouth. My niece, his own flesh and blood, was lying in a hospital bed with a dangerously low core temperature and protruding ribs, and all he cared about was a piece of decorative glass. "Julian," I said, slowly enunciating every single syllable. "Your daughter was locked in a freezing attic without power or food. She has severe hypothermia. She is severely malnourished. She is in the emergency room right now fighting for her life. Do you understand what I am telling you?" There was a pause on the line, but it was not the silence of a horrified father. It was the irritated sigh of a man whose perfect evening had been inconvenienced. "Oh, please," he scoffed, his tone dripping with condescension. "Stop being so dramatic, Vivian. Mom and Dad left her with plenty of food. She probably just locked herself in the attic to throw one of her usual temper tantrums. You broke a $10,000 door for a tantrum. I will make sure Dad takes it directly out of your trust fund." I listened to his breathing on the other end of the line, waiting for him to ask even a single question about Maya, waiting for him to ask if she was conscious, waiting for him to ask what room she was in. He asked nothing. "You make me sick, Julian," I said, my voice dropping to a deadly calm whisper. I pulled the phone away from my ear and pressed the red button disconnecting the call. I sat in the sterile hospital waiting room staring at the dark screen of my phone. A profound sense of disgust washed over me, washing away the last remaining shreds of loyalty I had for my blood relatives. They were not a family. They were a syndicate of narcissists who cared only about money status and imported glass. I slid the phone back into my pocket and stood up, squaring my shoulders. I was a forensic accountant. I spent my days dismantling the lives of powerful, corrupt people and sending them to federal prison. If my brother wanted to worry about a $10,000 broken door, I was going to gladly show him what a real financial catastrophe looked like. 2 days passed in a tense, exhausting blur of intravenous drips and hushed consultations with pediatric specialists inside the brightly lit hospital. Maya was carefully transferred from the chaotic emergency room to a private and highly secure pediatric recovery suite on the 4th floor. The doctors managed to stabilize her dangerously low core temperature, but they warned me that the long road to recovering from such severe chronic malnutrition was going to be slow and fraught with potential medical complications. I absolutely refused to leave her bedside. I slept in a rigid, uncomfortable plastic chair next to her bed and held her tiny, fragile hand whenever the night terrors made her wake up screaming in the dark. She was absolutely terrified that her grandparents would suddenly return to drag her back to that freezing attic prison. I repeatedly promised her that as long as I had breath in my lungs, they would never be allowed to lay a single finger on her again. The hospital staff had been incredibly supportive, providing around-the-clock care and treating Maya with the gentle human compassion she had been completely denied her entire life. But the quiet safety of our hospital sanctuary was violently shattered on the afternoon of the second day. I was stepping out into the sterile white hallway to grab a quick cup of black coffee from the nurse's station when the heavy metal elevator doors at the far end of the corridor slid open with a loud chime. My stomach dropped instantly. Striding down the polished linoleum floor was a veritable parade of tailored business suits and expensive designer winter coats. My parents, Richard and Victoria, had apparently booked an emergency first-class flight back from Paris, completely ruining their luxury wine tasting tour. They were flanked by my older brother Julian, who was furiously typing on his smartphone, and a slick-looking man carrying a premium leather briefcase who I immediately recognized as the ruthless family attorney. None of them looked like concerned relatives rushing to check on a critically ill child. They looked exactly like furious corporate executives marching into a hostile boardroom to fire a rogue employee. My mother Victoria was practically vibrating with visible rage, her diamond bracelets clinking aggressively as she walked. She wore a pristine white cashmere coat that looked entirely out of place in the clinical hospital environment. My father Richard walked with his jaw clenched so tightly, a muscle ticked visibly in his cheek. Julian just looked deeply inconvenienced by the entire situation. They stopped a few feet away from me, blocking the entire width of the hallway. The sheer audacity of their imposing presence after what they had deliberately done made my blood boil hot and fast. Before I could even speak a single word, my mother launched into her perfectly rehearsed theatrical performance. She threw her manicured hands up in the air, adopting the role of the ultimate victim. Vivian, how could you cause such a massive, embarrassing scene? She wailed, her voice echoing loudly down the quiet pediatric ward. Do you have any idea how much money we lost canceling our trip and rushing back here? We had to fly back across the ocean because you decided to play hero for absolutely no reason. I stared at her in absolute disbelief. Your granddaughter was freezing to death, I said, keeping my voice dangerously low so the other patients would not hear. She was severely malnourished and locked in an attic. Victoria rolled her eyes dramatically, letting out an exaggerated sigh of sheer annoyance. Oh, please do not exaggerate the situation, Vivian. The child has severe behavioral issues. Everyone knows she is incredibly difficult to manage. She must have locked herself in there to throw another one of her ridiculous tantrums. She is always acting out for attention, just like her mother used to do. She probably hid the expensive food we left for her, just to make us look bad to the authorities. The sheer magnitude of the gaslighting was truly staggering. Victoria was standing in a hospital hallway boldly claiming a 9-year-old child orchestrated her own starvation and hypothermia just to inconvenience their vacation. My father chimed in, crossing his arms tightly over his expensive tailored suit. Your mother is exactly right, Vivian. You completely overreacted by breaking our patio door and calling an ambulance. Maya was perfectly fine when we left for the airport. You are just trying to create family drama. I stepped backward until my spine pressed firmly against the heavy wooden door of Maya's hospital room. I spread my arms out wide, gripping the metal door frame on both sides, forming a physical human barricade to protect the little girl sleeping inside. You are not coming anywhere near this child, I stated, my voice carrying a quiet but absolute authority. You left a neon yellow sticky note on your kitchen island, explicitly stating you left a single loaf of bread for a fortnight. The doctors have thoroughly documented her chronic malnutrition. She weighed less than 50 pounds when I brought her in. That is not a behavioral issue or a tantrum. That is systematic, intentional child abuse. Julian stepped forward, pointing a manicured finger directly at my face. Listen to me, you pathetic spinster, he sneered. I am her biological father. You have absolutely no legal right to keep me away from my own daughter. Move out of the way right now before I have hospital security drag you out of this building. The slick family lawyer adjusted his expensive silk tie and offered a highly condescending smile. Miss Vivian, he began in a smooth, calculated tone designed to intimidate. Your brother is completely correct under the strict eyes of the law. You are unlawfully obstructing legal guardians from accessing their dependent minor. If you do not step aside immediately, we will happily involve local law enforcement and press heavy charges for kidnapping and trespassing. I did not flinch. I did not move a single inch from my protective stance. I looked dead into Julian's eyes and then shifted my icy gaze to my parents. The hospital social worker has already taken high-resolution photos of her protruding ribs, I said coldly. They photographed the early stages of frostbite on her tiny fingers. The police already have the sticky note you carelessly left on the counter in their evidence locker. If you try to open this door, I will start screaming for every nurse, doctor, and security guard on this floor to come witness the monsters who intentionally starved a child. The tension in the hallway skyrocketed, turning the sterile air impossibly thick and suffocating. My mother took a highly threatening step forward, her pristine white cashmere coat brushing against my outstretched arm, but I firmly held my ground, utterly refusing to let them pass. Victoria's face contorted into a mask of ugliness. She jabbed a manicured finger hard into my collarbone. Are you trying to lecture me on parenting right now? She hissed, her voice dripping with venom. You have a lot of nerve standing there acting like a righteous savior. You are a 34-year-old workaholic with no husband, no children, and no life to speak of. You spend your time buried in financial spreadsheets because nobody in the real world can stand to be around you. You are a pathetic spinster using my granddaughter to fill the empty void in your miserable existence. My father nodded in stern agreement. Your mother is exactly right, Vivian. You have no concept of what it takes to raise a child or manage a respectable household. You have no business interfering in our private family affairs. I let her cruel words hang in the heavy air. A few years ago, her biting insults would have made me shrink back and apologize. They had spent my childhood making sure I felt inadequate while constantly elevating Julian to a living god. But standing there with the horrific memory of Maya's freezing body burned into my brain, their transparent insults meant nothing to me anymore. I did not shrink. I did not waver. I stood taller, locking my eyes directly onto my mother's calculating gaze. "You are right about one thing, Mother," I replied, my voice ringing with authority. "I do not have a husband or children, but I would rather die alone than be the kind of monster who selectively loves children based on their skin color and their mother's massive bank account balance." Julian lunged forward, his face flushing a deep red. "Shut your mouth right now, Vivian. Do not you dare bring race or my wife into this." But I was just getting started. I turned my attention to my older brother. "Oh, I am bringing everything into this, Julian," I said sharply. "Let us talk about your parenting skills, since Mom thinks you are such a stellar example. You and your wealthy white second wife just bought your 5-year-old twins a miniature Mercedes-Benz for Christmas. You took them on a luxury ski trip to the Alps. You proudly post pictures showing off your flawless family to the entire world. Those two children are treated like royalty, pampered every single second of their lives." I paused, letting my harsh words sink in. "And while your new children are skiing in Switzerland and driving miniature cars, where exactly is your firstborn daughter, Julian? Where is Maya, your beautiful mixed-race child from your first marriage to Kendra? I will tell you where she is. She is treated like a dirty secret that you are desperate to bury. You allow our parents to hide her away in a freezing attic so she does not ruin the aesthetic of their high society book club meetings. You let them starve her and lock her like an unwanted stray animal because her existence is an inconvenience to your country club lifestyle." My mother gasped, clutching the lapels of her pristine coat. "How dare you accuse us of such horrible things? We gave that difficult girl a luxury roof over her head when her own mother was working herself literally into the ground and neglecting her. You stole her from a loving mother who worked double shifts as an emergency room nurse just to provide for her," I fired back. Stepping forward so aggressively, my mother stumbled backward. "You used your expensive lawyers to rip Maya away from Kendra because you could not stand the thought of your precious son having a child with a hard-working, working-class black woman. You claimed Kendra was an unfit mother because she worked for a living to save lives. You dragged her name through the mud in family court. And then what did you do once you finally won custody? Did you love Maya? No. You locked her in a freezing room and left her to die while you flew to Paris." The silence in the hallway was suddenly deafening. The family lawyer looked momentarily uncomfortable, shifting his weight from foot to foot as he processed the horrific reality of the situation he was currently defending. Julian refused to meet my eyes, suddenly finding the floor incredibly fascinating. But my father Richard quickly recovered his arrogant composure. He adjusted his silk tie and glared at me with cold contempt. "You are completely delusional, Vivian," my father stated coldly, crossing his arms. "You are making up wild, malicious lies because you are intensely jealous of your brother. Maya is a deeply troubled child who needs strict discipline and structure. We were providing exactly what the courts mandated. We have the absolute legal right to raise her as we see fit, and you have zero authority to question our methods." The family attorney stepped forward, regaining his aggressive posture. He pulled his smartphone from his pocket and tapped the screen deliberately. "Richard and Victoria are the sole legal guardians of this child," he stated, his voice echoing harshly in the ward. "You have no legal standing here, Miss Vivian. You are merely a bystander unlawfully obstructing their legal access. I am calling hospital security right now. When they arrive, we will have you forcibly removed from these premises for trespassing. And if you continue spreading defamatory lies, we will bury you in civil lawsuits until you are bankrupt." My mother smirked at the lawyer's threat. "You hear that, Vivian?" she taunted, stepping closer with a triumphant gleam in her eyes. "You are going to be dragged out of here by security like a common criminal. You have no power. You have no husband to protect you. You have no legal rights. Maya belongs to us, and we are taking her home right now whether you like it or not. Step away from that door before we ruin your entire miserable life permanently. Julian puffed out his chest and took another aggressive step toward me. His face was twisted with a level of arrogance that only a lifetime of complete pampering could produce. My mother is giving you an easy way out, Vivian. He barked, his voice echoing harshly against the sterile hospital walls. If you do not move right now, I am personally calling the police. I will have you arrested for breaking and entering. I will press charges for the $10,000 patio door you destroyed. And worse than all of that, I will press felony kidnapping charges against you for stealing my daughter from her legal residence. You will spend the next decade rotting in a federal prison while I go back to living my perfect life. You will lose your forensic accounting firm. You will lose your certified public accountant license. You will lose absolutely everything you have ever worked for. The slick family lawyer nodded vigorously, tapping his expensive leather briefcase. Your brother is not bluffing, Miss Vivian. We have the full weight of the law on our side. You broke into a private estate and removed a minor child without the consent of her legal guardians. That is kidnapping in the first degree. We will ensure the district attorney prosecutes you to the absolute fullest extent of the law. Your career investigating financial crimes is officially over. You will be a convicted felon by the end of the week. Now step aside and let us take Maya home. I looked at Julian. I looked at my mother and father. I looked at their ridiculously expensive lawyer. I did not flinch. I did not step away from the heavy wooden door of Maya's hospital room. I did not show them a single ounce of fear or intimidation. Instead, I slowly reached into the leather work tote I had slung over my shoulder when I arrived at the hospital. My fingers bypassed my encrypted hard drives and my calculator, finding exactly what I needed. I slowly pulled out a thick stack of papers bound by a heavy blue legal folder. The top page featured a bright red ink stamp from the county courthouse. I held the document up so the harsh fluorescent lights illuminated the official seal. Go ahead, Julian, I said, my voice perfectly calm and steady. Call the police right now. But you will have to explain to the responding officers why you are harassing the child's temporary legal guardian. The smug look on Julian's face vanished instantly. My mother gasped, taking a sudden step backward as if the legal document in my hand was a venomous snake. My father snatched the paperwork from my grip, his eyes darting frantically across the page. The family lawyer crowded in next to him, his professional composure completely shattering as he read the official court order. What is this garbage? Julian demanded, his voice cracking with sudden panic. This cannot be real. You cannot just steal a child and print out fake legal papers. It is very real, I stated, crossing my arms over my chest. The moment I brought Maya into the emergency room, I demanded to speak with the hospital social worker and the pediatric chief of staff. When they saw the undeniable physical state of your daughter, the protruding ribs, the severe hypothermia, the early stages of frostbite on her fingers, they immediately triggered a Child Protective Services protocol. I filed an emergency petition for temporary guardianship right here in the hospital cafeteria. A family court judge reviewed the medical reports and the photographs of her condition. They saw the neon yellow sticky note your mother left on the kitchen island detailing your European wine-tasting vacation while a child froze in an attic. The judge granted my petition at 6 o'clock this morning. The lawyer snatched the papers from my father's trembling hands. His eyes widened as he read the judge's signature. He swallowed hard, his throat bobbing nervously against his silk tie. Richard, he whispered, turning to my father with a look of genuine panic. She is telling the truth. The order is fully executed by Judge Harrison. Vivian has been granted full temporary medical and physical guardianship of the minor child. We cannot touch her. We cannot take the child. If we try to force our way into that room right now, we will be the ones arrested for violating a direct court order. My mother let out a shrill sound of pure outrage. This is a travesty, she shrieked, pointing a shaking finger at me. You manipulated a naive judge with your hysterical lies. You are trying to destroy our family reputation. You destroyed your own reputation the second you locked a starving child in a freezing room. I countered, my voice dropping to a lethal pitch. I am the only reason she is not lying in a morgue right now. And trust me, Victoria, this temporary guardianship is just the beginning. I am going to fight you for permanent custody, and I am going to win. Julian stepped forward, his fists clenched at his sides. You think you are so smart, Vivian? You think some temporary piece of paper makes you invincible? This is not over. I am going to hire the most ruthless legal team in this entire city. I will drag you through years of litigation. I will bankrupt you. I will make you wish you never stepped foot in that mansion. You have no idea who you are messing with. I know exactly who I am messing with, Julian, I replied, staring him down. I am messing with cowards. My father grabbed Julian's arm, pulling him back. We are leaving, he commanded, his voice tight with fury. But hear me clearly, Vivian. You have declared war on your own blood. We will strip you of everything. Enjoy your little victory today, because by next week you will be begging us for mercy. They turned and marched away defeated. They turned and marched away defeated. But their retreat was merely a tactical withdrawal, not a surrender. I watched their tailored coats disappear into the hospital elevator, and I knew with absolute certainty that the real war had just begun. For the next 2 days, I stayed barricaded inside that pediatric recovery suite. Maya slowly regained her color. The intravenous fluids and careful refeeding protocols worked small miracles on her fragile frame. When she finally smiled at a cartoon playing on the hospital television, my heart swelled with a fierce, protective love. I promised her she was safe, and I meant it. But outside those sterile hospital walls, my parents were actively orchestrating my total professional destruction. The first blow landed 48 hours later. I had just stepped out into the hallway to check my work email on my phone when a call came through from my largest corporate client. They were a mid-sized logistics firm that accounted for nearly 40% of my independent forensic accounting revenue. The chief executive officer sounded uncomfortable but highly decisive. Vivian, he began, clearing his throat loudly. We are going to have to terminate our auditing contract effective immediately. We will pay out the remainder of the month, but we are moving our files to a different agency. I was stunned. I had just uncovered a massive tax loophole that saved them hundreds of thousands of dollars. Why, I asked, keeping my voice perfectly steady, despite the sudden spike in my heart rate. Has there been an issue with my reporting? No, your work is fine, he stammered. But Richard made it clear that keeping you on the payroll would severely damage our upcoming real estate negotiations with his investment group. It is just business, Vivian, you understand. He hung up before I could reply. I stared at the dark screen of my phone. My father was weaponizing his massive portfolio of commercial real estate to choke off my income. Less than 2 hours later, my second-largest client, a wealthy restaurateur who frequently golfed with my father at his exclusive country club, sent a brief 2-sentence email terminating my services. Just like that, nearly 60% of my annual income vanished into thin air. They were methodically executing their threat to strip me of absolutely everything. I needed my career to afford the expensive legal battles ahead and to provide for Maya. My parents knew exactly where to strike to cause the maximum amount of financial hemorrhage. But the financial sabotage was only half of their retaliation strategy. The social assassination came next. Later that evening, I received a text message from a sympathetic former high school classmate who still ran in my mother's elite social circles. She sent me a screenshot from a private country club messaging board. My mother, Victoria, had posted a lengthy, tear-stained update to her wealthy friends. It was a masterpiece of manipulative fiction. My heart is completely shattered, Victoria wrote in the message. My deeply troubled daughter, Vivian, has suffered a severe mental breakdown. As many of you know, she has always struggled with the tragic reality that she will never have a husband or children of her own. In a fit of jealous, barren hysteria, she broke into our home while we were traveling and unlawfully removed our beloved granddaughter, Maya. Vivian is currently holding her hostage in a hospital room, filling the child's head with malicious lies. We are working with top attorneys and psychiatric professionals to get Vivian the mental health help she so desperately needs and to bring our precious Maya safely home. The sheer audacity of the post made my stomach physically churn. Victoria was brilliantly playing the grieving, devastated matriarch. She was twisting my emergency rescue of a starving child into a narrative of a deranged kidnapping orchestrated by a bitter spinster. The comments under the post were filled with wealthy socialites offering their prayers and condemning my supposed mental instability. They were effectively isolating me from the entire community, painting me as an unpredictable lunatic so that no judge or client would ever take my words seriously. They wanted to make sure that when I finally presented my evidence of their abuse, everyone would dismiss it as the ramblings of a jealous madwoman. The pressure began to squeeze my chest like a physical vice. The hospital bills for Maya's intensive care were already piling up rapidly. My forensic accounting firm was bleeding revenue by the hour. My legal fees to fight their high-powered attorneys for permanent custody would easily run into the hundreds of thousands of dollars. Richard and Victoria had an unlimited war chest filled with dark money and offshore accounts. They had the local judges in their pockets and the entire elite social network hanging on to their every word. I was sitting on a mountain of truth, but truth alone was incredibly fragile against a tidal wave of unlimited wealth and perfectly crafted public relations. I sat back down in the uncomfortable plastic chair outside Maya's hospital room and buried my face in my hands. I was smart, but I was losing the ground war. I could track hidden money expertly, but I could not fight a smear campaign alone. I needed an ally. I needed someone who hated them as much as I did. I needed someone who knew their secrets and had a legal claim to destroy their custody arrangement. My mind raced back to the vicious insults my mother had hurled in the hallway. They had used their expensive lawyers to rip Maya away from her loving mother, Kendra. They destroyed Kendra's life because she was a working-class black woman who did not fit into their pristine country club aesthetic. Kendra had fought them tooth and nail until she was financially broken and legally silenced. If anyone knew the depths of their depravity, it was the woman who had birthed the child sleeping in the room behind me. If anyone knew the depths of their depravity, it was the woman who had birthed the child sleeping in the room behind me. Finding Kendra was not difficult for a forensic accountant. I spent the next hour sitting in that uncomfortable hospital chair, running digital searches through employment databases and public records. My family had effectively erased her from our social orbit, but they could not erase her digital footprint. I discovered she was working as an emergency room triage nurse at St. Jude's, a severely underfunded public hospital on the opposite side of the city. The employee roster indicated she was currently working grueling back-to-back double shifts, likely trying to survive the financial ruin my parents had maliciously inflicted upon her. I arranged for the pediatric nurses to keep a strict watch on Maya, promising I would return before she woke up. I drove across the city, the winter storm having finally broken, leaving behind towering gray snowbanks and slick, dangerous roads. I parked my SUV in the bleak concrete parking garage of St. Jude's and waited near the employee exit. The biting wind whipped through the concrete pillars, but I barely felt the cold. My mind was rehearsing a dozen different ways to approach the woman my family had systematically destroyed. Just past 7 in the morning, the heavy metal doors pushed open. A stream of exhausted medical staff shuffled out into the freezing morning air. I spotted her immediately. Kendra was a tall, striking African-American woman with her hair pulled back into a tight, functional braid. She wore faded blue scrubs and a heavy dark winter coat, carrying a worn canvas tote bag. Dark circles shadowed her eyes, a physical testament to the brutal double shifts she endured. But even through the profound exhaustion, she carried herself with a quiet, unyielding dignity. I stepped out from behind a concrete pillar blocking her path to the transit station. Kendra. I said, my voice echoing slightly in the empty garage. She stopped dead in her tracks. Her dark eyes snapped toward me, narrowing instantly with sharp recognition. The sheer exhaustion on her face immediately morphed into absolute hostility. Her posture went rigid and her hands clenched into tight fists at her sides. "Vivian," she stated, her voice dropping to a lethal defensive register. "What the hell do you want? Did Victoria send you here to serve me with more bogus legal papers? Because you can tell your mother and your worthless brother that I already gave them everything. I have nothing left for your family to steal." I held up both of my hands, palms facing outward, in a universal gesture of surrender. "No one sent me, Kendra. My parents have absolutely no idea I am here. I am not working with them. I am at war with them." Kendra let out a harsh, bitter laugh that echoed off the cold concrete walls. "Right. The loyal, quiet little sister is suddenly rebelling against the mighty empire. Give me a break, Vivian. I know exactly how your family operates. You play the good cop while Richard and Victoria hold the knife. I am not falling for whatever sick, manipulative game you are running today. Move out of my way before I call hospital security and have you arrested for harassment." She stepped sharply to the right, trying to bypass me. I did not argue. I did not try to defend my past actions or offer empty platitudes. Instead, I simply reached into my coat pocket, pulled out my smartphone, and unlocked the screen. I stepped sideways, keeping a respectable distance, but holding the bright screen up so she could clearly see the high-resolution photograph. "Look," I said softly. "Just look at the screen, Kendra." Kendra glared at me suspiciously for a fraction of a second before her eyes flicked to the phone. She froze completely. The breath rushed out of her lungs in a jagged, desperate gasp. The photograph on the screen showed Maya fast asleep in a warm hospital bed, buried under a mountain of heated blankets. Her small face was peaceful, the intravenous line taped securely to her tiny hand. I swiped to the next photo, showing Maya sipping a small cup of warm broth, her eyes looking directly at the camera with a fragile, tentative smile. Kendra dropped her heavy canvas tote bag onto the icy concrete floor. Her hands flew up to cover her mouth, and a choked, agonizing sob ripped from her throat. She stepped closer, staring at the glowing screen like a starving person looking at a feast. Her trembling fingers reached out, hovering just millimeters above the glass surface, afraid to touch it, lest the image vanish like a cruel mirage. "My baby," she whispered, her voice breaking into 1,000 shattered pieces. "Oh my God, my beautiful baby girl. What happened to her, Vivian? Why is she in a hospital bed? Why does she look so incredibly thin?" I lowered the phone and looked Kendra directly in the eyes. I found her locked in the freezing attic of my parents' mansion 2 nights ago. They left her there without power or food, while they flew to Paris for a wine-tasting vacation. I broke down their glass patio door and carried her out. I filed for emergency temporary guardianship the second we arrived at the emergency room. Richard, Victoria, and Julian tried to physically take her back yesterday, but I used a court order to force them away. Kendra stared at me, her dark eyes wide with a mixture of absolute horror and dawning realization. "They left her to freeze," she repeated, the words tasting like poison. "They fought me in court for 2 agonizing years. They bankrupted me, claiming I was too poor and worked too many shifts to be a proper mother. And then they locked my daughter in an attic to starve." "Yes," I said, my voice thick with shame. "And I am so profoundly sorry, Kendra. I am so sorry that I stood by and stayed silent while they destroyed you in family court. I believed their lies because it was easier than confronting the monsters I shared a last name with. My silence made me complicit in their cruelty, and I will carry that deep, sickening guilt for the rest of my life. But I am not staying silent anymore. I am going to burn their entire perfect world straight to the ground." Kendra slowly picked up her canvas tote bag. The hostility in her posture had vanished, completely replaced by a fierce, burning intensity that matched my own. She looked at the smartphone in my hand and then back up at my face. "You did not come all the way across the city at 7 in the morning just to show me pictures and apologize, Vivian. You need something from me. What is it?" "I need your help," I said firmly. "They are already attacking my forensic accounting firm and trying to paint me as an unstable kidnapper. They have unlimited money and powerful connections. But you know their absolute darkest secrets, Kendra. You know exactly how their vicious legal strategies operate. I want to permanently strip them of their custody rights and give Maya back to the only mother who ever truly loved her. I want to destroy them completely, but I cannot do it alone." Kendra stood in the freezing wind, her eyes locked onto mine. Two women from entirely different worlds, bound together by our mutual hatred for the exact same toxic family. A slow, determined smile spread across her tired face. "Buy me a cup of cold black coffee, Vivian," she said, adjusting the strap of her heavy bag on her shoulder. "And let us figure out exactly how we are going to make those monsters pay." We found a harsh fluorescent lit diner 2 blocks from the hospital. The place smelled of stale grease and strong bleach, but it was empty enough to give us privacy. We slid into a cracked red vinyl booth near the fogged back window. I ordered a pot of black coffee, and we sat in heavy, tense silence while the waitress filled our chipped mugs. Kendra wrapped her elegant fingers around the steaming cup, letting the heat seep into her cold skin. The harsh overhead lighting cast deep shadows across her face, highlighting the profound physical toll that 3 years of brutal separation and grueling medical shifts had taken on her. I took a slow sip of my bitter coffee and waited for her to speak. Kendra took a deep, shaking breath, staring down into the dark liquid. 3 years ago, she began, her voice tight with suppressed emotion. Julian decided he was completely done playing house with a working-class registered nurse. He met his wealthy, white heiress, and instantly my entire existence was a massive inconvenience to his shiny new lifestyle. I did not fight the divorce, Vivian. I just wanted my daughter and a peaceful life. But your parents, Richard and Victoria, could not let Julian walk away with a standard custody arrangement. They needed to utterly erase me. She looked up, her dark eyes flashing with trauma. They hired ruthless, high-powered family lawyers who treated me like a criminal. They dragged me through endless, grueling depositions and buried me under mountains of expensive legal paperwork. I was making a modest income as an emergency room triage nurse, working long, irregular shifts to keep a safe roof over our heads. Their legal team weaponized my dedication to my job. They painted my 12-hour nursing shifts as severe child neglect. They told the judge that my modest apartment was an unstable, dangerous environment. They purposefully drained my meager life savings dry with relentless, frivolous motions until I could no longer afford to pay my own retainer fees. I was bankrupted by their unlimited corporate war chest. I sat across from her, feeling a sickening wave of absolute disgust for my own blood relatives. It was not just about the money either, Kendra continued, leaning forward across the sticky laminate table. It was the subtle, devastating systemic racism they carefully wove into every single court document and legal argument. They never used outright aggressive racial slurs. They were far too calculated and socially polished for that. Instead, they heavily used carefully coded language that a biased, deeply conservative family court judge eagerly swallowed whole without question. They successfully argued that Maya desperately needed a better class of environment to properly thrive. They submitted glossy professional photographs of their sprawling gated community and deliberately contrasted them with images of my diverse working-class neighborhood, claiming Maya would be exposed to highly undesirable elements if she stayed with me. They emphasized the vital societal need for cultural refinement and proper upper-class pedigree. The judge sat high up on his towering wooden bench, looked down at a hard-working, devoted black mother, and decided that a wealthy white country club estate was inherently vastly superior to a home filled with genuine maternal love. They permanently stripped me of primary physical custody based entirely on the deeply racist illusion of high society respectability. And Julian just sat there holding his brand new wife's hand, nodding along happily, while they legally stole my baby girl away from me. I reached across the table and placed my hand firmly over hers. "I am so profoundly sorry, Kendra," I said, my voice trembling with raw conviction. "I cannot possibly undo the terrifying nightmare they forced you to endure, but I swear to you right now that their arrogant reign of terror officially ends today. I have temporary emergency medical guardianship, and I am absolutely not letting them take Maya back to that freezing locked mansion. But Victoria and Richard are already actively launching a massive smear campaign to completely destroy my forensic accounting firm and paint me as an unstable kidnapper." They have the unlimited money and powerful social connections to drag this out until they successfully exhaust me, just like they maliciously exhausted you 3 years ago. They want to cut off my income stream so I cannot afford to fight them for permanent custody. Kendra tightened her grip on my hand, her exhausted expression hardening into pure, unyielding steel. They think they are totally invincible because they have always bought their way out of facing legal consequences, she stated fiercely. But they made a fatal mistake this time, Vivian. They left hard physical evidence of their severe child abuse, and they severely underestimated the one person in their twisted family who knows exactly how to read their hidden financial secrets. You have the brilliant professional skills to effectively dismantle their entire corrupt corporate empire from the inside out, and I have the ultimate motivation to watch them burn straight to the ground. We are going to completely ruin them, Vivian. I looked deeply into Kendra's eyes and saw a brilliant, powerful reflection of my own burning fury. The timid, quiet sister they had pushed around for decades was entirely dead and gone. In her place stood a highly trained financial investigator sitting across from a fiercely dedicated protective mother who had been pushed past the absolute brink of human endurance. We officially formed an unbreakable alliance right there in that dingy diner. Two highly intelligent, driven women fully prepared to burn my family's entire wealthy facade straight to the ground. We need to hit their bank accounts before they even realize what is happening, I whispered. They took away your child and they tried to take away my career. Now we take away the only thing they actually love. Kendra nodded slowly, a dangerous smile finally breaking through her exhaustion. Kendra nodded slowly, a dangerous smile finally breaking through her exhaustion. She reached across the sticky laminate surface of the diner table and pulled her worn canvas tote bag onto her lap. Her hands moved with a deliberate, heavy precision as she unzipped the main compartment. You think the expensive lawyers and the biased family court judge were the absolute worst parts of what they did to me? She asked, her voice dropping to a low, bitter rasp. You think ripping my beautiful daughter out of my arms and dragging my name through the mud was the end of their vicious campaign against my life? That was only the beginning, Vivian. That was just the opening act of their sick financial game. I sat perfectly still, my hands gripping my coffee mug so tightly my knuckles ached. What else did they do to you, Kendra? I asked, my heart hammering a harsh rhythm against my ribs. What else could they possibly take from you after they had already stolen your only child? Kendra pulled a battered smartphone from her bag and tapped the cracked glass screen. Her eyes were hard and flat, completely devoid of any remaining vulnerability. They did not just want to punish me for existing, she stated coldly. They wanted to permanently ensure that I would never ever have the financial resources to hire a decent appellate lawyer and fight them to get my daughter back. During the final custody hearing, your parents' high-powered legal team presented a heavily fabricated psychological evaluation. They aggressively argued to the judge that Maya had suffered severe developmental delays and deep emotional trauma from living in my working-class neighborhood. They convinced the court that she desperately required elite specialized trauma counseling, premium nutritional management, and highly exclusive private tutoring to overcome her supposedly disadvantaged early childhood. My stomach twisted into a tight, painful knot as I listened to her outline my parents' carefully calculated lies, and the judge believed them, I asked, feeling a fresh wave of absolute nausea. The judge swallowed every single word of their racist classist garbage. Kendra spat back, her dark eyes blazing with reignited fury. But they did not stop there. They argued that since I was the biological mother, I should be held legally responsible for funding this elite rehabilitation. The judge completely agreed with them. He ordered me to pay a mandatory $3,000 every single month in child support. But the money does not go to Julian. It goes directly into a highly restricted account your parents explicitly created, called the Maya Special Care Fund. I have been working grueling back-to-back double shifts in the emergency room for 3 agonizing years just to make those mandatory court-ordered payments. If I miss a single month, they promise to have me thrown in jail for contempt of court. My forensic accountant brain instantly hijacked my emotional response. The numbers began scrolling through my mind with terrifying crystalline clarity. $3,000 a month. 36 months. $108,000 in total cash transfers. I sat frozen in the red vinyl diner booth, feeling the air completely leave my lungs. $108,000. My mind violently flashed back to the horrific scene in the freezing attic 2 nights ago. I saw the cheap ragged pajamas hanging loosely off Maya's emaciated frame. I felt the sharp jutting edges of her tiny protruding ribs pressing against my winter coat when I carried her down the sweeping staircase. I remembered the single thin decorative throw blanket that provided absolutely zero insulation against the deadly winter blizzard. I thought about the single loaf of bread they had casually left on the marble kitchen island as her only source of sustenance for a 2-week luxury vacation to Paris. Kendra, I whispered, my voice cracking under the sheer immense weight of this monstrous revelation. They starved her. She weighed less than 50 pounds when I carried her into the emergency room. She was suffering from severe chronic malnutrition. She did not have premium dietary management. She did not have exclusive private tutors. She did not even have a functioning space heater. Where did all your money go? Kendra stared at me, the final pieces of the horrifying puzzle locking into place in her exhausted mind. Her breathing became ragged and shallow. For 3 years I have been bleeding myself completely dry, working myself into an early grave, believing that at the very least my hard-earned money was providing my baby girl with a comfortable life. I thought they were buying her expensive clothes and feeding her gourmet meals. I thought that was why she was supposedly better off with them. I wired $108,000 into their accounts. They monetized her. I stated the sickening truth, finally washing over me in its entirety. They did not fight for custody because they wanted to love a grandchild. They fought for custody because they wanted to punish Julian's first wife and create a highly lucrative, untaxed revenue stream. They literally used an innocent 9-year-old child as a convenient financial hostage to extort money from an exhausted emergency room nurse. The profound magnitude of their casual evil was almost too vast to fully comprehend. But the shock quickly burned away, leaving behind a cold, razor-sharp professional focus. I was no longer just a protective aunt fighting for a neglected child. I was a seasoned financial investigator, staring directly at a massive multi-year paper trail of systemic corporate fraud and extortion. I pushed my coffee mug aside and leaned aggressively across the sticky laminate table, my eyes locked onto Kendra's phone. "Open your banking application right now," I commanded, my voice completely devoid of any emotion except pure lethal determination. "I need you to show me the exact details of those transactions. I need the specific routing numbers. I need the destination account numbers. I need the precise legal name of the entity that holds this special care fund." Kendra did not hesitate for a single fraction of a second. She rapidly unlocked her phone and navigated directly to her mobile banking history. She pulled up the detailed transfer receipts for the past 36 months and shoved the device across the table toward me. "The destination account is registered under a private wealth management firm affiliated with your father's commercial real estate holdings," Kendra explained, her voice tight with suppressed rage. "The transfers clear on the first of every month like clockwork." I grabbed the phone and stared intensely at the tiny glowing screen. My trained eyes instantly recognized the complex routing sequences and the specific corporate banking structures. This was not a standard trust account for a minor child. This was a sophisticated corporate shell account designed to obscure incoming revenue streams and bypass standard tax reporting protocols. I pulled my own smartphone from my heavy winter coat pocket and rapidly began taking high-resolution photographs of every single transfer receipt on Kendra's screen. I captured the routing numbers, the dates, the exact dollar amounts, and the specific corporate recipient designations. The meticulous digital paper trail was absolutely flawless. My parents had been so unbelievably arrogant in their complete sense of untouchable power that they had not even bothered to properly mask the money laundering structure. They assumed a working-class nurse would never have the resources or the financial literacy to investigate where her mandatory payments were actually going. They made a massive, fatal miscalculation. I said, my fingers flying across my screen as I securely backed up the photographic evidence to my encrypted private server. They assumed you would just keep paying out of sheer terror of going to jail. and they assumed I would just keep playing the role of the quiet, obedient daughter who never questioned their pristine country club facade. But they forgot that they literally paid for my advanced degrees in forensic accounting. They forgot that I spend every single day tracking down hidden assets for federal corporate investigations. I slid Kendra's phone back across the table. My heart was pounding with a dangerous, exhilarating rhythm. Give me exactly 48 hours, Kendra. I am going to tear down their sophisticated corporate firewall brick by brick. I am going to track every single cent of that $108,000 through their offshore accounts and shell companies. And when I find exactly what they spent your blood money on, I am going to hand deliver the evidence to the federal authorities. Kendra looked at me, her dark eyes burning with a fierce, unyielding fire. Do not just find the money, Vivian, she whispered, her voice laced with absolute lethal promise. Find the money and use it to completely destroy their lives. I nodded once, a slow, cold smile spreading across my face. I promise you, Kendra. By the time I am finished with Richard and Victoria, they will be begging for the freezing dark attic. I drove straight back to my apartment after leaving the diner, my mind already operating at 1,000 miles a minute. I locked my heavy front door, drew the blackout curtains tight across my windows, and walked directly into my home office. For the next 48 hours, I ceased to be a grieving aunt or a betrayed daughter. I became a highly weaponized forensic accountant, operating with a singular lethal objective. I brewed a massive pot of black coffee, cracked my knuckles, and woke up my encrypted servers. I started with the routing and account numbers I had photographed from Kendra's banking application. The transfers were completely automated, leaving her account on the first of every month and vanishing into the labyrinth of my father's commercial real estate empire. But money never truly vanishes. It always leaves a digital footprint if you know exactly where to look. I ran the destination account through a series of proprietary financial tracking algorithms I usually reserved for taking down corrupt hedge fund managers. The initial layer of security was laughably arrogant. My parents had used a private wealth management firm they practically owned, assuming no one would ever dare subpoena their closely guarded financial records. I broke through the first corporate firewall by cross-referencing the public tax filings of my father's real estate holding company. The $3,000 monthly deposits from Kendra did not stay in the Maya Special Care Fund for more than 12 hours. The moment the funds cleared the bank, they were immediately routed through two separate dummy corporations designed to wash the money clean. But they made a crucial, arrogant error. They kept the exact dollar amount identical across every single transfer. $3,000 moved from account A to account B, and finally to account C. I traced the final destination account to a corporate entity registered in Delaware under the name Apex Marine Holdings Limited Liability Company. I pulled the corporate registration records from the state database and felt a vicious, predatory smile spread across my exhausted face. The sole registered owner and primary beneficiary of Apex Marine Holdings was none other than my golden child brother Julian. I dug aggressively into the financial outlays of Julian's shell company. The $3,000 extorted from Kendra every single month was not being saved for Maya's future. It was not being used for specialized trauma counseling or premium nutritional management. The monthly deposits perfectly matched an automated loan repayment schedule to an offshore maritime lending bank. Julian was using the blood money squeezed from a severely overworked emergency room nurse to pay the monthly mortgage on a 60-foot luxury yacht. The yacht was sickeningly named the Golden Boy, demonstrating his absolute lack of remorse. He was literally sailing around the Great Lakes sipping expensive champagne, funded entirely by the starvation and neglect of his own flesh and blood. The financial depravity did not stop there. I found another recurring digital paper trail stemming from Julian's personal accounts. Every time my parents wired him the extra $5,000 from their so-called care fund, the exact amount was immediately funneled into unregulated offshore gambling syndicates. Julian had a massive, crippling gambling addiction. He was recklessly betting thousands of dollars on high-stakes poker games and underground sports matches, losing everything almost instantly. My parents were fully funding his catastrophic losses, using Maya's existence as a convenient cover story to move large sums of undocumented cash without alerting their corporate board members. But the absolute crown jewel of this investigation, the ultimate nuclear code that would guarantee their permanent destruction, came when I hacked into my parents' personal tax filings. I successfully pulled all of their official tax returns from the past 3 years. My father Richard and my mother Victoria were not just laundering extorted money for their golden boy. They were actively claiming the $108,000 as a massive deductible philanthropic childcare expense on their federal tax returns. This calculated deception effectively reduced their overall corporate tax burden by an absolutely staggering amount. They were intentionally lying to the Internal Revenue Service to secure massive tax breaks while funneling the extorted cash directly into Julian's yacht mortgage and gambling debts. I sat back in my ergonomic desk chair staring blankly at my glowing dual monitors. My eyes were burning from lack of sleep, and my hands were trembling slightly from the sheer adrenaline of the discovery. They had committed systemic corporate embezzlement, extortion, wire fraud, and federal tax evasion. In the eyes of the family court, they might have looked like wealthy, respectable grandparents. But in the eyes of the federal government, they were high-level financial criminals looking at decades in federal prison. I systematically downloaded every single ledger transfer receipt and fraudulent tax document onto 3 separate encrypted flash drives. I printed out the most damning bank statements and arranged them into a thick red tabbed binder. I highlighted the routing numbers in bright yellow ink, matching the exact color of the sticky note my mother had left on the marble island. They thought they could silence me by destroying my forensic accounting firm. They thought cutting off my corporate clients would leave me entirely defenseless and desperate. Instead, they had blindly handed me the absolute perfect weapon to annihilate their entire prestigious lineage. My cell phone vibrated violently on my desk, shattering the quiet hum of my computer servers. It was a highly urgent text message from Victoria directly summoning me to a mandatory family meeting at my father's corporate headquarters. They were absolutely ready to deliver their final ultimatum, thinking they had already won the war. I picked up the heavy red binder, feeling the immense and unyielding power of undeniable financial truth radiating from its pages. I grabbed my heavy car keys and walked straight out the front door. I was fully prepared to detonate the explosive evidence that would permanently bury them forever. The drive to downtown Chicago took less than 30 minutes, but it felt like the final march toward a long-awaited execution. My father's corporate headquarters occupied the top 5 floors of a towering glass and steel skyscraper that dominated the city's skyline. It was a monument to his massive ego and his ruthless business practices. I pulled my SUV into the underground parking garage, bypassing the visitor section and sliding directly into a reserved executive spot. I killed the engine and sat in the quiet vehicle for a brief moment, resting my hands on the steering wheel. I took one long, deep breath, centering my mind, and locking away any lingering traces of daughterly guilt. I picked up the thick, red tabbed binder from the passenger seat, holding it tightly against my chest like a physical shield. The elevator ride to the top floor was silent and swift. When the heavy silver doors slid open, I stepped onto the plush carpet of the executive reception area. The front desk receptionist did not even ask for my name today. She simply pressed a small button under her desk and gestured toward the massive double doors at the end of the hallway. They were expecting me. They were eagerly waiting to watch me crawl in and beg for professional mercy. I pushed open the heavy oak doors and stepped into my father's cavernous corner office. The room was designed strictly for intimidation. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a dizzying panoramic view of the frozen city below. The furniture was all dark mahogany and imported black leather. My father Richard sat comfortably behind his massive desk, looking like a king surveying his conquered territory. My mother Victoria stood elegantly by the window, holding a delicate porcelain teacup. And lounging carelessly on a sleek leather sofa in the corner was Julian, the golden child himself. He was casually scrolling through his smartphone, looking entirely unbothered by the fact that his daughter was recovering from starvation in a hospital bed. They all looked up when I entered. None of them offered a greeting. The atmosphere in the room was thick with arrogant triumph. They genuinely believed their coordinated smear campaign had successfully broken my spirit. They thought the sudden loss of my two biggest corporate clients had left me financially ruined and terrified. Victoria offered a small, condescending smile that did not reach her cold eyes. She took a slow sip of her tea before placing the cup on a silver saucer. "Vivian," she purred, her voice dripping with artificial sympathy. "We are so glad you decided to be reasonable and answer our summons. We know the last 48 hours must have been incredibly stressful for you. It is never easy watching a successful business collapse overnight." I did not speak. I simply walked across the expansive room and stood directly in front of my father's desk. I kept my posture perfectly straight and my expression entirely blank. I did not sit down even though there was an empty chair waiting for me. By remaining standing, I forced my father to look up at me, disrupting his orchestrated power dynamic. Richard leaned back in his expensive ergonomic chair, steepled his fingers together, and looked at me with the absolute disdain of a ruthless corporate predator. "Let us skip the pleasantries, Vivian," he stated in a harsh, commanding tone. "You made a massive miscalculation by challenging us. You let your jealous emotions dictate your actions, and now you are facing severe professional and financial ruin. We warned you what would happen if you declared war on this family. We demonstrated exactly how quickly we can strip you of your livelihood. Your reputation in the financial sector is currently plummeting. Our associates genuinely believe you are suffering from a dangerous psychotic break. No reputable firm will ever hire you to audit their books again." He paused, letting the weight of his words settle into the silent room. Julian chuckled softly from the corner, tossing his phone onto the sofa. "You should have just stayed out of it, Vivian," he mocked. "You always try to play the righteous hero, but you are entirely out of your league." My father raised a hand, silencing Julian. "Despite your unforgivable betrayal, Vivian, your mother and I are still willing to offer you a way out of this disaster. We are willing to be generous because we want to put this ugly family drama behind us permanently." He opened the top drawer of his desk and pulled out a sleek black leather folder. He placed it squarely in the center of the polished mahogany surface and slowly slid it across the desk toward me. I looked down at the black folder. "Open it," my father commanded. I reached out with one hand and flipped the leather cover open. Inside lay 3 pristine pieces of paper. The first was a cashier's check made out to my name for $100,000. The second was a strict non-disclosure agreement barring me from discussing Maya with any external party. The third was a legal document relinquishing my emergency guardianship and returning full custody of the child to Richard and Victoria. I stared at the check, feeling a cold wave of absolute disgust wash over my body. They thought they could simply buy my silence. They thought $100,000 was the exact price tag for a little girl's life and my professional integrity. It was incredibly insulting that they believed I was that cheap. They had spent more than that on Julian's yacht in a single year. "Take the money, Vivian," my father said, his voice dropping to a low, lethal threat. "Sign the agreement today. Drop the guardianship. If you cooperate, we will call your former clients and tell them you have recovered from your mental episode. We will repair the damage to your firm and let you go back to your quiet little life. But if you refuse this offer, we will completely destroy your career. We will see to it you never work in finance again anywhere in this country. The choice is yours. Take the cash right now and walk away or lose absolutely everything you have." I looked down at the pristine cashier check resting inside the black leather folder. $100,000. It was a substantial amount of money to most people, but to my family, it was nothing more than pocket change used to sweep their atrocities under the rug. I did not reach for the pen my father had conveniently placed beside it. Instead, I slowly closed the leather cover and pushed it right back across the polished mahogany surface. Then I lifted the heavy red tabbed binder I had been holding tightly against my chest and slammed it down directly in the center of my father's desk. The resounding thud echoed sharply like a gunshot in the cavernous executive office. "I am a forensic accountant, Dad," I stated, my voice radiating lethal confidence. "Did you really think I would not follow the money?" I flipped the heavy red cover open, revealing hundreds of pages of highlighted bank statements, wire transfers, and corporate tax filings. I watched my father's arrogant expression instantly evaporate. "I tracked every single cent of the $108,000 you systematically extorted from Kendra. I know exactly how you routed her monthly child support payments through your dummy corporations." Julian scrambled up from the leather sofa, his face draining of all color. "What is she talking about, Richard?" I ignored my brother and pointed directly at a highlighted transaction. "The money never went to a care fund for Maya. It went directly into a shell company registered in Delaware called Apex Marine Holdings. It paid the monthly mortgage on Julian's 60-foot luxury yacht and funded his massive offshore gambling debts. You used a starving 9-year-old child to launder money for your golden boy." My mother, Victoria, dropped her porcelain teacup. It shattered against the hardwood floor, spilling hot liquid everywhere, but she did not even look down. Her eyes were locked onto the damning documents in absolute horror. My father scrambled to regain his footing. He leaned forward, his face flushing an angry crimson. "You illegally hacked into our private corporate accounts, Vivian," he shouted, slamming his fist on the desk. "You violated a dozen federal privacy laws to get this proprietary information. Any competent judge will throw this garbage out instantly. This evidence is inadmissible in a family court custody hearing. You have absolutely nothing." I smiled coldly, staring directly into his panicked eyes. "You are absolutely right," I replied without missing a single beat. "It might be tricky to submit these specific financial traces in family court during a standard custody dispute. The evidentiary standards for digital financial forensics and family law are notoriously complex. It would take months of subpoenas and endless litigation to get a family judge to even look at these corporate spreadsheets." I leaned closer to his desk, resting my fingertips lightly against the edge of the wood. "But do you know where it is 100% legal to submit them without any red tape whatsoever?" I paused, letting the terrifying silence stretch out like a tightened wire across the room. "The Internal Revenue Service whistleblower office." The color completely drained from my father's face, leaving him looking like a terrified old man. Julian stumbled backward, his legs hitting the edge of the sofa before he collapsed heavily onto the leather cushions. I flipped to the very last section of the red binder, exposing their personal tax returns. "Let us do some basic math, Dad. I am sure you can follow along. You did not just launder extorted money for Julian. You actively claimed that exact same $108,000 as a deductible childcare expense on your federal tax returns for 3 consecutive years. That is not just a creative accounting error or a minor oversight. That is intentional federal tax fraud." I tapped a manicured finger aggressively against his fraudulent signature on the tax documents. When you combine the tax evasion with wire fraud across state lines and corporate embezzlement, you are looking at a minimum of 20 years in a federal penitentiary. The federal government does not care about your country club memberships or your highly paid family lawyers. They do not care about your untouchable social standing in the elite community. When I hand them this perfectly organized, ironclad digital paper trail, they will swiftly freeze every single asset you own. They will seize this skyscraper. They will seize your gated mansion. They will confiscate Julian's luxury yacht and auction it off to pay your massive federal fines. Your entire financial empire will be reduced to absolute ashes before the end of the current fiscal quarter. I will personally make sure the federal auditors rip your lives apart, down to the very last penny." My mother grabbed the edge of the window frame, struggling desperately to keep her physical balance. "Vivian, please," she gasped, her voice trembling with genuine terror. "You cannot do this to your own flesh and blood. We will lose absolutely everything we have ever worked for in our entire lives. You already tried to take everything from me, Victoria." I fired back, my voice devoid of any mercy. You tried to destroy my career and ruin my professional reputation. You tried to paint me as a lunatic to everyone I know. But worst of all, you locked an innocent child in a freezing attic to starve while you drank wine in Paris. You stopped being my family the moment you turned a 9-year-old girl into a disposable tax write-off. Julian suddenly lunged across the room, desperately trying to grab the red binder from the desk. I snatched it away smoothly, stepping back out of his reach. Do not even think about it, Julian. I warned, my eyes narrowing dangerously. These are just the printed copies. The original encrypted files are already securely uploaded to 3 separate offshore servers. If anything happens to me, or if you try to retaliate against my firm again, those files will trigger an email directly to the Department of Justice. I turned my back on my terrified brother and looked at my defeated father one last time. You have exactly 1 week, I stated, issuing my final ultimatum. 1 week until the final custody hearing. You will show up to that courtroom. You will surrender all parental and guardianship rights to Maya and hand them back to Kendra. You will publicly drop your malicious smear campaign against me and restore my corporate clients immediately. You will walk away and never contact me, Kendra or Maya, ever again. I walked toward the heavy oak double doors, my heels clicking sharply against the hardwood floor. If you try to fight me in that courtroom, I press the launch button and send this binder to the federal government. I pushed the heavy doors wide open, stepping out into the reception area without looking back. The choice is yours, Dad. Enjoy your week. The heavy oak doors clicked shut behind me, sealing my father and his golden child inside their luxurious corporate tomb. I walked out of that skyscraper with a distinct spring in my step, knowing I had just fundamentally shifted the power dynamic of our entire family. But a wounded animal is always the most dangerous right before it completely collapses. I knew my parents would not simply roll over and surrender without attempting one final desperate maneuver to save their carefully curated public image. They were cornered, but they were still exceptionally wealthy and dangerously well connected. Their immediate response to my devastating ultimatum was a frantic exercise in high society damage control. Less than 48 hours after I dropped the red binder on my father's desk, elegant gold foil invitations were hastily couriered across the city. Richard and Victoria were aggressively accelerating the date of their annual For the Children charity gala. It was a sickeningly ironic title given their actual treatment of my 9-year-old niece. They rented out the grand ballroom of the most exclusive luxury hotel in downtown Chicago, pouring hundreds of thousands of dollars into a desperate public relations stunt. Their objective was crystal clear. They needed to quickly pack a room full of influential local politicians, powerful corporate executives, and most importantly, family court judges. They intended to shower these decision-makers with expensive champagne and lavish catered meals, effectively bribing the very people who might oversee their upcoming custody hearing. They wanted to publicly cement their status as benevolent philanthropic grandparents before my devastating evidence could ever reach a courtroom. While my parents frantically threw money at their crumbling reputation, Kendra and I were meticulously preparing for war. We met at my apartment the evening of the gala. The exhausted, overworked emergency room nurse I had confronted in that freezing parking garage just a few days ago was completely gone. In her place stood a fiercely determined mother, ready to burn down an empire to get her child back. We had spent the afternoon shopping for the absolute perfect armor for our impending battle. Kendra emerged from my guest bedroom wearing a stunning floor-length emerald green evening gown that perfectly complemented her striking features. She had her dark hair styled into an elegant sweeping updo, radiating an undeniable regal authority. I wore a sharply tailored crimson pantsuit that felt more like a tailored suit of armor than a party outfit. We looked nothing like the hysterical spinster and the unstable mother my parents were so desperately trying to paint us as. We looked like absolute executioners. Are you ready for this? Kendra, I asked, adjusting the cuff of my blazer. I know walking into a room full of the people who helped destroy your life 3 years ago is going to be incredibly difficult. Kendra looked at her reflection in the hallway mirror, her dark eyes flashing with unyielding resolve. I have spent the last 3 years being terrified of those arrogant monsters, she stated, her voice completely steady. I let them convince a court that I was not worthy of raising my own flesh and blood because I lacked their country club pedigree. But they are the ones who should be absolutely terrified tonight, Vivian. Let us go crash a party. The grand ballroom of the luxury hotel was a masterclass in excessive opulent wealth. Massive crystal chandeliers cast a warm golden glow over dozens of perfectly arranged circular tables. Waiters in crisp white tuxedos circulated silently, carrying silver trays loaded with premium champagne and expensive caviar. We slipped past the overwhelmed reception desk, bypassing the guest list entirely, and positioned ourselves in the dark shadows just outside the massive mahogany double doors leading into the main ballroom. Inside, the extravagant event was reaching its theatrical peak. The gentle hum of classical string music faded away as the main stage lights brightened. My mother, Victoria, stepped up to the microphone wearing a custom designer gown that easily cost more than Kendra's annual nursing salary. The entire ballroom fell into a respectful, hushed silence as she gripped the edges of the wooden podium. "Thank you all so much for coming tonight," Victoria began, her voice trembling with perfectly rehearsed artificial emotion. "We gather here to support the most vulnerable members of our society, our innocent children. As many of you know, this cause is incredibly personal to Richard and me." She paused dramatically, reaching up to dab at a non-existent tear near her eye. A collective murmur of sympathetic support rippled through the wealthy audience. 3 years ago, my husband and I were forced to make the most agonizing decision of our entire lives. Victoria continued, projecting the ultimate image of a heartbroken but courageous matriarch. We had to step in and rescue our precious granddaughter Maya from a deeply unstable and severely neglectful environment. Her biological mother was simply unable to provide the proper care, structure, and refinement that a growing child so desperately requires. It has been an immense, heavy burden, but also the greatest blessing of our lives to provide Maya with the elite upbringing she truly deserves. The sheer staggering hypocrisy of her speech made my blood run instantly cold. She was standing under a glittering crystal chandelier, publicly accepting the adoration of judges and politicians for supposedly saving a child that she had literally locked in a freezing, unheated attic to starve just a few days ago. She was actively demonizing a hard-working, dedicated black mother to a room full of wealthy, white elites, using blatant coded racism to mask her own horrific financial crimes. I looked at Kendra, standing beside me in the shadows. Her jaw was clenched so tightly a small muscle ticked in her cheek, but she stood perfectly tall, her posture radiating immense strength. Now I whispered, reaching for the heavy brass handles of the double doors. We pushed the massive mahogany doors open simultaneously. They swung outward with a loud, heavy thud that instantly echoed across the cavernous ballroom. The sudden sharp noise cut through the polite applause that had just begun to swell from my mother's tearful performance. Hundreds of heads turned simultaneously toward the back of the room. The string quartet in the corner abruptly stopped playing mid-note. Kendra and I stepped out of the shadows and directly into the bright ambient light of the grand ballroom. We did not hesitate. We did not wait for an invitation. We walked in perfect synchronization straight down the center aisle, cutting directly through the sea of perfectly decorated tables. Our expensive heels clicked sharply and rhythmically against the polished marble floor, sounding like the relentless ticking of a countdown clock. The reaction was immediate and absolutely electrifying. The room's attention shifted entirely and completely to us. Whispers erupted across the ballroom like a sudden wildfire as guests recognized who was crashing their exclusive gathering. The disgraced spinster daughter and the exiled unfit mother had somehow returned. But we did not look disgraced or unfit. We looked powerful. We looked untouchable. On the brightly lit stage, my mother's dramatic performance completely died in her throat. The fake tears instantly dried up. The microphone picked up her sharp, ragged gasp of pure terror as she gripped the edges of the wooden podium so hard her knuckles turned white. In the front row, I saw my father Richard half stand from his chair, his face draining of all color. Julian, who was sitting beside him, looked like he had just seen two literal ghosts walking out of a graveyard. We marched directly toward the front of the stage, radiating absolute confidence, stopping only when we were mere feet away from the podium. The entire room held its collective breath, waiting to see exactly what kind of destruction we had brought to their perfect charity gala. The entire room held its collective breath, waiting to see exactly what kind of destruction we had brought to their perfect charity gala. I detached myself from Kendra's side and veered sharply to the left. While Kendra marched directly to the front row, stopping inches away from my father and brother, I made a beeline straight for the elevated tech booth. The young technician running the lighting board stood up in a panic, waving his hands as I invaded his workspace. "Excuse me, you cannot be back here," he stammered nervously, reaching for his headset. I leveled a terrifying, icy glare at him. "Step away from the console right now," I commanded, my voice leaving zero room for debate. "Unless you want to be legally implicated as an accessory to federal tax fraud, I strongly suggest you go take a coffee break." The technician swallowed hard and practically sprinted away from the control desk. I stepped up to the mixing console. With the precise movements of an auditor accustomed to breaching encrypted servers, I pulled a black USB drive from my pocket and jammed it directly into the projector terminal. I bypassed their slideshow of fake philanthropic achievements and completely overrode the main feed. Behind my mother, the massive projection screen flickered violently. Victoria tapped her microphone, trying to regain control of her bewildered audience, but I had already cut the primary audio feed. Her voice died in her throat as the giant screen suddenly illuminated with crisp, high-definition security footage. I had extracted the video files directly from my parents' own smart home security system. The crystal-clear footage showed the sprawling, snowy driveway of their estate recorded just days ago. The wealthy attendees murmured in profound confusion as they watched Richard and Victoria happily strolling out of their front doors. They were bundled in expensive designer coats, laughing carelessly as a chauffeur loaded heavy Louis Vuitton luggage into a waiting black limousine. It looked like a standard vacation departure until the audio track kicked in. I pushed the master volume slider to its absolute maximum limit. The security microphones picked up a sound that instantly turned the warm, luxurious ballroom into a freezing crypt. It was the muffled, agonizingly clear sound of a child screaming from the third-story attic window. "Grandma, please," the tiny voice of Maya echoed, bouncing off the crystal chandeliers. "Please let me out. It is so cold. I am so hungry, Grandma." The high society crowd gasped in collective raw horror. Several women covered their mouths with their hands. A prominent family court judge dropped his champagne flute, shattering it against the polished marble floor. On the massive screen, the audience watched in sickened fascination as Victoria paused by the limousine door. The video showed her looking directly up at the attic window, acknowledging the desperate cries of her starving granddaughter. She did not rush back inside to unlock the door. Instead, the footage captured her rolling her eyes in profound annoyance. She casually checked her diamond-encrusted Rolex and turned to my father. "Ignore her, Richard," Victoria said clearly on the recording, her voice dripping with callous irritation. "If we miss our first-class flight to Paris because she is throwing a tantrum, I will be furious. Tell the driver to hurry up." The video showed them sliding comfortably into the heated limousine and driving away, leaving a 9-year-old girl to freeze to death. The silence that followed the video was heavier than a physical weight. The complete destruction of their carefully crafted public image was instantaneous and absolute. Victoria stood frozen at the podium, her face completely drained of blood, resembling a terrified ghost. She opened her mouth to offer some pathetic, fabricated excuse, but the microphone remained dead in her trembling hands. The wealthy donors, influential politicians, and powerful judges who had just been clapping for her supposed charity work were now staring at her with unvarnished, visceral disgust. Suddenly, a primal roar of sheer violent panic ripped through the ballroom. Julian had finally snapped. Realizing his entire luxurious life and endless supply of stolen offshore money had just evaporated, He leaped over the front row of velvet chairs. His face was flushed a dangerous dark purple, his fists tightly clenched as he lunged furiously toward the tech booth to attack me. "You crazy psycho!" he screamed. "I will kill you for this!" He did not make it more than 3 steps. Kendra moved with the blinding speed and ferocity of a mother pushed past the absolute brink. She stepped smoothly and directly into his path, planting her high heels firmly against the marble floor. She shoved both of her hands hard against his chest, physically halting his aggressive charge with shocking strength. Julian stumbled backward completely, caught off guard by the unyielding power of the woman he spent years trying to break. He looked up at Kendra, his eyes wide with frantic rage, but she simply stared him down with a cold smile. Her voice carried across the silent ballroom, ringing out with the authority of a woman who had just won a 3-year war. "See you in court, you deadbeat thief," she stated, her words slicing through him like a razor blade. Julian shrank back, visually deflating under her intense, unwavering gaze. The fight completely drained out of him as the terrifying reality of his situation finally took hold. Around us, the ballroom descended into absolute chaos. Disgusted guests were already standing up, throwing their cloth napkins onto the tables and marching angrily toward the exit doors. Prominent political figures shielded their faces, desperately avoiding any association with the disgraced family. The lavish charity gala was completely and irreversibly ruined. I stepped away smoothly, pulling my USB drive from the terminal, and walked calmly to join Kendra at the front of the room. We stood shoulder to shoulder, proudly watching the mighty corporate empire of Richard Victoria and Julian burn straight to the ground. Will there be a follow-up conversation about this narrative? The morning of the final custody hearing arrived with a biting chill, perfect for the legal slaughter we were about to unleash. Kendra and I walked through the bronze doors of the county courthouse, moving with the exact precision of 2 seasoned soldiers heading into battle. The implosion of my parents' charity gala dominated the news cycles, but public opinion meant nothing inside these oak-paneled walls. We needed a legal victory to strip Richard Victoria and Julian of their unearned parental authority. We took our seats behind the plaintiff table alongside our sharp family law attorney. Across the aisle, my parents and Julian sat flanked by an army of litigators. They looked paler than at their ruined gala, but their arrogant posture remained intact. They genuinely believed their immense wealth could easily buy them out of child abuse. The presiding judge, a formidable man with zero tolerance for courtroom theatrics, slammed his gavel to call the session to order. The defense attorney, wearing a custom Italian suit, launched an aggressive damage control offensive. He paced across the polished floor, attempting to spin the horrifying video we broadcast. "Your Honor," he began, his voice dripping with calculated persuasion. "The footage presented by the plaintiffs has been maliciously taken out of context. My clients are loving grandparents who were simply rushing to catch a scheduled flight. They had no idea the child was locked in the attic. The door has a faulty latch mechanism that frequently jams. My clients explicitly hired a private nanny to watch the child while they were away, but the nanny irresponsibly failed to show up. It was an unfortunate logistical misunderstanding, not deliberate endangerment." I felt my jaw clench. They had fabricated an invisible phantom nanny to absorb the blame for their cruelty. Having laid down his pathetic smokescreen, the defense attorney instantly pivoted to a vicious character assassination aimed directly at Kendra and me. He gestured aggressively toward our table, his voice rising in manufactured indignation. "Your Honor, we must look closely at the questionable motives of the women attempting to tear this family apart. The biological mother, Kendra, works chaotic double shifts as an emergency room nurse. She is financially unstable and physically absent, leaving her incapable of providing the structured elite environment a growing child requires. And Aunt Vivian is acting out of a deeply rooted psychological vendetta, trying to destroy her parents' reputation to soothe her personal jealousies. My respected clients possess tens of millions in liquid assets and an unparalleled ability to provide this child with the finest education money can buy." Kendra sat perfectly still, her dark eyes burning through the defense attorney. They were playing the exact same racist classist playbook they used to steal Maya 3 years ago, banking on the assumption that the judge would blindly favor a wealthy white aesthetic over a hardworking black mother. But this time they were facing a completely different legal battlefield. Our attorney stood up, smoothing the front of her blazer. She picked up a stack of officially stamped documents and walked directly to the judge's towering bench. "Your Honor," she stated, her voice ringing with chilling clarity. Opposing counsel speaks highly of his client's exceptional financial stability and supposedly superior environment. We would like to formally submit physical evidence demonstrating exactly how they maintain that stability. Our attorney handed the first folder to the bailiff. Exhibit A contains certified medical records from Memorial Hospital. Upon emergency admission, the minor child weighed less than 50 pounds. She suffered from severe chronic malnutrition, advanced hypothermia, and early frostbite. A faulty door latch does not cause a child to starve for months, Your Honor. This was calculated, systematic physical abuse. My parents shifted uncomfortably in their leather chairs. Julian wiped sweat from his forehead. Our attorney was already pulling the second binder from her briefcase. The unmistakable red-tabbed binder I had built during my 48-hour forensic accounting marathon. Exhibit B, she announced, her voice echoing sharply. This is a comprehensive forensic financial audit of the Maya Special Care Fund. Opposing counsel claims the biological mother is financially unstable. The truth is, my clients extorted $108,000 from her over 3 years under the strict guise of court-ordered child support. But those funds were never spent on the child. The defense attorney leaped to his feet, flushing red. "Objection, Your Honor," he shouted frantically. "These financial records are completely irrelevant to a family court custody proceeding. We move to strike this evidence immediately." The judge held up a single hand, silencing the lawyer instantly. "Overruled, counselor," the judge barked, his eyes narrowing dangerously. "I am highly interested in where exactly this court-ordered child support ended up. Continue." Our attorney offered a cold, predatory smile. "As the audit explicitly proves, Your Honor, not a single cent went to the child. Richard and Victoria systematically laundered the extorted funds through 3 separate corporate shell companies before depositing the money directly into an offshore account owned by their son Julian. The child support was used exclusively to pay the monthly mortgage on Julian's luxury yacht and to fund his illegal offshore gambling debts. Furthermore, Richard and Victoria aggressively claimed those extorted funds as a philanthropic childcare deduction on their federal tax returns, committing undeniable felony tax fraud. They did not provide a superior environment, Your Honor. They ran a corporate extortion ring using a starving 9-year-old child as their primary financial hostage. The courtroom descended into a suffocating, horrified silence. The defense attorney slowly sank back into his chair, paralyzed by the sheer magnitude of the federal crimes we had just laid bare. Richard and Victoria looked like they were going to vomit right there at the defense table. Julian buried his face in his trembling hands, realizing his golden boy immunity had evaporated. We had dragged their darkest secrets into the unforgiving light of a court of law, and there was nowhere left to hide. The oppressive silence in the courtroom was finally broken by the sharp rustle of thick paper. The judge held the financial audit in his hands, his face an unreadable mask of judicial fury. He did not look at the defense attorney, who was still actively sweating through his custom Italian suit. He fixed his terrifying gaze directly on my father. "The financial corruption is a matter for the federal authorities," the judge stated, his voice slicing through the heavy air like a razor blade. "I will be forwarding this entire binder to the Internal Revenue Service and the Department of Justice by the end of the business day. However, my jurisdiction is family court. My primary concern is the physical and psychological welfare of the minor child involved in this abhorrent circus." The judge turned his attention to our attorney. "Counselor, I was informed there is a supplementary exhibit containing the direct digital communications between the grandparents and the biological father. I want to see the statements right now." Our attorney immediately approached the bench and handed over a smaller black binder. I had extracted these text messages directly from my parents' synchronized cloud backups. They thought deleting texts from their phones permanently erased them, but they completely underestimated my digital forensics background. The judge opened the black binder. He adjusted his reading glasses and spent 2 agonizingly long minutes scanning the printed pages in total silence. With every passing second, the air in the room grew colder. Victoria gripped the edge of the defense table, her knuckles turning completely white. Julian squeezed his eyes shut, looking like a man waiting for a firing squad to pull the trigger. The judge slowly exhaled a harsh breath. He looked up from the pages and glared down at Victoria. The sheer absolute disgust radiating from the bench was palpable. Mrs. Sterling, the judge, began ensuring every single person in the gallery could hear his booming voice clearly. In my 30 years on the bench presiding over some of the most tragic family disputes imaginable, I have rarely encountered this level of casual calculating evil. You claimed in your sworn affidavits that you provided a superior, highly refined environment for this child. Let us examine exactly what your definition of a superior environment entails. The judge looked back down at the printed transcript. He cleared his throat and began reading my mother's exact text messages out loud to the breathless courtroom. Message dated November 12th, sent from Victoria to Julian. The judge spoke with chilling precision. Just lock the mixed kid in the attic so she does not ruin the aesthetic for my book club. And make sure you pull Kendra's $3,000 this month. Your yacht insurance is due. A collective gasp ripped through the gallery behind us. The court reporter stopped typing for a fraction of a second, staring at the defense table in profound horror. Kendra sat beside me, her spine rigid and her chin held high, but I could see tears of validated fury shining in her dark eyes. The racist venom and utter disregard for a human life were now a matter of permanent public record. But the judge was not finished. He flipped to the next page and continued reading. Message dated December 3rd, sent from Julian to Victoria. Tell the nurse we need another $5,000 for emergency dental work. I lost heavy at the poker tables last night and need to cover the spread before my wife finds out. Victoria's response reads exactly as follows. I will forge the dental invoice tomorrow morning. Just keep the kid out of sight when our country club friends come over for the holiday mixer. Do not let her wander downstairs and ruin the expensive imported rugs. Victoria buried her face in her hands, sobbing loudly. It was not a cry of remorse or guilt. It was the pathetic wail of a narcissist who had just been publicly stripped of her flawless mask. Richard stared blankly ahead, completely paralyzed by the catastrophic destruction of his entire social and corporate standing. The defense attorney pushed his chair back slightly, physically distancing himself from his own toxic clients out of sheer professional self-preservation. The judge slammed the black binder shut with a deafening crack. He slowly pulled his reading glasses off his face and leaned aggressively over the high wooden bench. You came into my courtroom 3 years ago. The judge roared, his voice dripping with righteous wrath. You weaponized your massive wealth and your elite social status to convince this court that a hard-working, dedicated emergency room nurse was an unfit mother. You used coded racism and financial intimidation to steal a child from her loving home. You swore on the Holy Bible that you would provide a safe, nurturing environment for your own granddaughter. He pointed a heavy finger directly at Julian, who flinched violently in his seat. And you, sir, are an absolute disgrace to the concept of fatherhood. You allowed your parents to lock your own flesh and blood in a freezing, unheated attic to starve while you used her mother as a personal automatic teller machine to fund your gambling addictions and luxury boats. You abandoned your child to maintain your pristine image with your new wealthy wife. The judge shifted his blazing eyes to Richard and Victoria. You are not rescuing a child. You are operating a cruel, illegal extortion syndicate under the guise of familial duty. You treated a human being like a disposable financial asset and a shameful secret. You starved her. You froze her. You stole from her mother. And you had the unparalleled arrogance to sit in this courtroom today and demand that I return her to your custody. You possess tens of millions of dollars, but you are completely bankrupt of any basic human decency. The courtroom remained paralyzed in a stunned, heavy silence. The judge did not break eye contact with my parents as he delivered his final verbal blow. You are the most arrogant, morally corrupt individuals I have ever had the profound displeasure of hosting in my courtroom. If I had the legal authority to place you all in handcuffs right this second, I would do so without hesitation. But rest assured, the federal agents who will be knocking on your mansion door tomorrow morning will gladly handle that task for me. I am done listening to your pathetic lies. The judge struck his heavy wooden gavel, signaling the absolute end of their terror. Effective immediately, I am stripping Richard and Victoria of all legal and physical custody rights. The judge declared his voice, leaving no room for appeal. I am also permanently revoking the parental rights of the biological father. Julian Full. Primary custody of the child is immediately restored to the biological mother. Kendra. Furthermore, the court officially names Vivian as the designated secondary legal guardian. You will have zero contact with this child or these women. A permanent restraining order goes into effect this very second. This court is permanently adjourned. Kendra collapsed into my shoulder, weeping tears of absolute, unadulterated relief. The heavy, suffocating nightmare that had consumed her life for 3 agonizing years was finally over. We stood up, ignoring the pathetic whimpers from the defense table, and walked proudly out of the room. The moment we pushed through the heavy oak doors into the marble hallway, my parents scrambled out right behind us. The arrogant corporate titans who had marched into the hospital days ago were completely gone. In their place stood 2 broken, terrified criminals, facing the absolute destruction of their entire existence. Julian did not even follow them out. He remained slumped at the defense table, paralyzed by the realization that his wealthy wife was undoubtedly filing for divorce at that very moment. "Vivian, please," my mother begged, reaching out with a trembling hand but stopping short when Kendra stepped protectively in front of me. Victoria was openly weeping, her expensive mascara running down her pale cheeks in dark, ugly streaks. "You have to stop the federal audit. Vivian, please, they will take the house. They will take the company. We will be left with absolutely nothing." My father. Richard looked at me with wild, desperate eyes. "We can make a deal," he pleaded, his voice cracking with panic. "We will give you whatever you want. We will set up a massive trust fund for Maya. We will give you equity in the commercial real estate firm. Just make the Internal Revenue Service investigation go away. We are your family, Vivian. You cannot send your own parents to federal prison." I looked at the 2 pathetic figures cowering before me. I felt no pity. I felt no lingering daughterly guilt. I felt nothing but cold, absolute clarity. I stepped around Kendra and looked directly into my father's terrified eyes. "Family does not lock a 9-year-old girl in a freezing attic to starve," I stated, my voice echoing like ice against the marble walls. "Family does not extort a hardworking mother to fund a luxury yacht. You are not my family. You are simply the biological anomalies I had the misfortune of sharing a bloodline with. You are nothing to me. Enjoy your prison sentences." I turned my back on them, linking my arm firmly through Kendra's, and we walked out of the courthouse straight into the cold but bright, crisp morning air. The federal agents did not even wait for tomorrow. They raided my father's headquarters and their gated mansion that very afternoon. The scandal dominated the local news cycles for weeks. The Internal Revenue Service seized every bank account, commercial property, and offshore asset they tried hiding. Julian watched in disgrace as federal marshals repossessed his luxury yacht right out of the harbor. They were indicted on dozens of felony charges, including massive tax evasion, wire fraud, and corporate embezzlement. The elite country club friends who applauded my mother's fake charity speeches deleted their phone numbers, pretending they never met them. The family empire was permanently reduced to worthless ashes. Fast forward 6 months. The bitter, freezing winter has finally melted away, giving rise to a beautiful, warm summer. I am standing in my bright, sunlit kitchen, wiping a smudge of white flour off my cheek. The house is filled with the incredible sweet aroma of baking chocolate chip cookies and the loud, joyous sound of genuine laughter. Maya is standing on a small wooden step stool beside the kitchen island, carefully mixing a giant bowl of cookie dough. She looks absolutely vibrant. Her cheeks are full and healthy. Her eyes are bright with pure childish mischief. And she is completely safe. She dips a finger into the bowl and stealthily tries to steal a taste of the raw dough. Hey, I definitely saw that. Kendra laughs out loud, lightly swatting her daughter's sneaky hand away with a wooden cooking spoon. Kendra is standing right next to me, wearing a comfortable yellow sundress, instead of those exhausted blue hospital scrubs. The heavy dark circles under her eyes are completely gone. We are not just co-guardians or distant relatives anymore. We forged an unbreakable sisterhood born from the ashes of a war we won together. We protect each other fiercely, and we love this little girl unconditionally. I lean against the granite counter and look directly at you watching this right now. If you have ever been the scapegoat of a toxic family, if you have ever been pushed aside, belittled, or told that you owe your loyalty to people who constantly abuse you, I need you to hear this loud and clear. Blood does not automatically make someone family. Blood does not give anyone a free pass to disrespect your boundaries or harm the people you love. You have the absolute power to walk away from the poison. You have the strength to stand your ground and fight back against the monsters hiding behind perfect smiles. Your true family is not always the one you are born into. Your true family is the one you deliberately choose to build. It is made of the people who show up for you in the dark, the people who feed your soul, and the people who would never, ever leave you out in the cold. Choose your family wisely and never be afraid to burn the fake one to the ground. The story of Vivian, Kendra, and Maya beautifully illustrates that bloodlines do not define a true family. Society often pushes the narrative that we must tolerate mistreatment simply because we share DNA with our abusers. However, this tale shatters that illusion, proving that real family is built on fierce protection, mutual respect, and unconditional love. When Vivian and Kendra united to save little Maya from a freezing attic and hold their corrupt relatives accountable, they forged an unbreakable chosen sisterhood. It teaches us the profound power and necessity of walking away from toxicity. Have you ever had to establish hard boundaries with toxic relatives? Share your story in the comments below.